The bride revealed she was infertile at the altar, but never imagined what the groom would do next. Overcome with nervousness, Sarah adjusted her white dress for the 1,000th time when her mother, Mrs. Regina, entered the room holding a bouquet of lilies. "Sweetheart, it's time, everyone is waiting." Sarah swallowed hard. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind since she received the definitive diagnosis: infertility. A small word with immense weight. She had tried to tell Michael several times, but the fear of rejection paralyzed her. "Mom, what if he doesn't accept me?" she whispered, tears in her eyes. "He loves you, Sarah. True love overcomes any obstacle." But would it overcome this? The historic church in the center of the city was packed. Relatives from Boston, friends from New York, colleagues from the architecture firm, all gathered to celebrate their union. Michael waited at the altar, impeccable in his dark suit, nervously chatting with his best friend and best man, Tyler. The son of a prominent Chicago businessman, Michael had grown up with all the expectations of a firstborn. Continue the family. Business, marry the perfect woman, and of course carry on the family name. The wedding march began and everyone stood. Sarah entered, escorted by her father, Mr. Anthony, a retired university professor who couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. From a distance, she appeared to be the image of the happy bride, but each step toward the altar felt like walking toward her own sentence. Michael smiled when he saw her, his eyes shining with emotion. Sarah tried to smile back, but her face seemed frozen. With each step, the weight of her secret suffocated her more. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When she finally reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Michael's, who squeezed it affectionately and whispered, "You look beautiful." The priest, an elderly man with white hair who had known Sarah's family since her childhood, began the ceremony with words about love, companionship, and family. Each time the word family was mentioned, Sarah felt a stab in her heart. The moment for the vows approached. Michael went first, speaking with an emotional voice about how Sarah had transformed his life, about the dreams they shared, and about the family they would build together. "We'll be the best parents in the world," he said, and Sarah felt her world crumbling. When her turn came, the words simply wouldn't come out. The silence stretched, uncomfortable. The guests began to exchange worried glances. Michael gently squeezed her hand, encouraging her. Sarah began, her voice barely audible. "I can't do this." A murmur swept through the church. Michael frowned, confused. "What's wrong, love?" he asked softly. Sarah took a deep breath and looked directly into the eyes of the man she loved. "I'm infertile, Michael. I can't have children, never. I found out a few weeks ago and I didn't have the courage to tell you. You've always talked about having a big family, about having children. I can't give you that." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael's face went from confusion to shock. He slowly released Sarah's hand as if processing the information. The guests, sensing that something serious was happening, began to murmur more loudly. Sarah expected any reaction: anger, sadness, so even understanding. What she didn't expect was what happened next. Michael took a step back, looked at her one last time with an expression that Sarah couldn't decipher, turned and quickly walked out of the church, leaving her alone at the altar. Mrs. Regina rushed to embrace her daughter, who remained paralyzed, while Mr. Anthony tried to calm the guests. Tyler, the best man, hurried after Michael. "I ruined everything, Mom," Sarah whispered through tears. "I should have told him before." The days that followed were the most difficult in Sarah's life. She isolated herself in the apartment she had bought 2 years ago in the Riverside neighborhood in Boston, refusing to answer calls or receive visitors. Her younger sister, Melissa, was the only one who managed to get in, bringing food and forcing her to eat. "You need to eat, Sarah, and you also need to talk to him," Melissa insisted. "He made his feelings very clear when he left like that," Sarah responded without energy. After a week, Sarah finally gathered the strength to return to work. The architecture firm where she was a partner was located downtown, and burying herself in projects seemed the only way to move forward. Her colleagues, already knowing what had happened, treated her with an excessive care that only made everything more difficult. It was on a Friday, almost 2 weeks after the wedding disaster, that Sarah decided to do something she had been avoiding. Pass by Central Park, the place where she and Michael had met for the first time during an architecture exhibition. It was a longer way home, but something drove her in that direction. The park was quiet that afternoon. Sarah walked slowly through the well-maintained gardens, reminiscing about happy moments. When she reached the stone bench near the small lake, her heart almost stopped. Sitting there looking at the water was Michael. Her first instinct was to turn and run away, but her feet seemed glued to the ground. Michael looked up and saw her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he gestured for her to approach. With her heart racing, Sarah walked to the bench and sat down beside him, maintaining a safe distance. The silence between them felt like a third presence. "I tried to call you several times," Michael finally said, his voice hoarse. "I wasn't ready to talk," she replied without looking at him. Michael took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket and extended it to Sarah. "What's this?" she asked, hesitant to take it. "Something I should have given you on our wedding day after what you said, but I panicked." Sarah took the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Michael's unmistakable handwriting. "Please read it," he asked. With her heart beating hard, Sarah began to read. "My Sarah, if you're reading this, it's because I finally found the courage to give you this letter. First, I need to ask for your forgiveness for the way I reacted. It was cowardly and unforgivable. There's no excuse for leaving you alone in that moment. You know me better than anyone, and you know that having children has always been a dream for me. When you said those words at the altar, it was as if the future I had imagined for us disappeared in an instant. It wasn't your condition that scared me, it was the fear of having to choose between the love I feel for you and a dream I've carried forever. In the days that have passed, I realized something. Dreams can change, can transform, can find new paths. But what I feel for you is irreplaceable and immutable. I love you, Sarah. I love you for who you are, not for what your body can or cannot do. I want to spend my life by your side, building our story, in whatever way is possible. If you still want, we can still have our family. There are many children waiting for love, for a home. Or it could be just the two of us, and that would also be a perfect family. Please, give me a second chance to prove that my love is greater than any obstacle. Forever yours, Michael." Sarah raised her eyes full of tears. Michael was watching her with apprehension. "Why did you run away?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael ran his hand through his dark hair in a nervous gesture that Sarah knew well. "Honestly, because I panicked. It was all so sudden there, in front of everyone. I didn't know how to react. It was as if two worlds were colliding, my love for you and the dream of being a father. I needed time to understand that these worlds don't have to be mutually exclusive." Sarah wiped the tears with the back of her hand. "Do you really believe that? That we can have a family in other ways?" Michael moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I believe it. But more important than that, I believe in us, in our love." In that moment, something healed inside Sarah. Not completely, because some wounds take time, but enough for her to feel that maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what was broken. "Let's take it slow," she said. "We need to relearn to trust each other." Michael nodded, respecting her space. "All the time you need." In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild their relationship, meeting for coffees, lunches, and long walks around Boston. They talked a lot about the future, about expectations, and about how to deal with family and friends after the scandal of the interrupted wedding. Michael's mother, Mrs. Catherine, a woman from Boston's high society known for her difficult temperament, did not hide her disappointment with the situation. During a tense lunch at the family home in Beacon Hill, she didn't miss the opportunity to make malicious comments. "My son, are you sure? Family has always been so important to us, continuing our name, our lineage." "Mom, we've already talked about this," Michael responded firmly. "My decision is made. I love Sarah and we're going to be together." "There are other ways to have a family," added Mr. Richard, Michael's father, trying to ease the situation. Although more understanding than his wife, his difficulty in fully accepting the idea of not having biological grandchildren was visible. Sarah, feeling uncomfortable, excused herself and went out onto the terrace to get a breath of fresh air. Michael followed shortly after. "I'm sorry about that," he said, embracing her from behind as they looked out at the Boston skyline. "It's not your fault. I understand their disappointment." "They'll get over it," Michael stated with conviction. "And if they don't, it's their problem, not ours." Sarah smiled, feeling strengthened by his support. That lunch was just the first of many challenges they would face together. Determined to formalize their union without the weight of social expectations, Sarah and Michael planned a symbolic ceremony, intimate with only the closest people, to reaffirm their commitment. They chose a small inn in Cape Cod, a historic coastal town that both loved. The big day arrived on a sunny Saturday in September. The ceremony would be held in the inn's gardens overlooking the sea. Sarah wore a simple white silk dress without a veil or tiara. Michael waited for her under an arch of tropical flowers, accompanied by Tyler, again his best man. Few guests were present. Sarah's parents, her sister Melissa, Michael's parents, who agreed to participate after much insistence, from their son, some close friends and work colleagues. The atmosphere was serene and intimate, exactly as they had planned. The celebrant, a friend of the couple named Lisa, began the ceremony speaking about love, resilience, and new beginnings. Sarah and Michael exchanged emotional glances, feeling that they were finally on the right path. It was when the celebrant asked the guests to share their wishes of happiness for the couple that the unexpected happened. A woman in a red dress stood up among the guests. It was Rebecca, Michael's ex-girlfriend from college. "I have something to say," Rebecca announced, her voice loud and clear, rising above the murmurs of surprise. Michael instantly tensed, and Sarah felt her heart race. Rebecca wasn't on the guest list. Someone must have brought her as a +1. "Michael," Rebecca continued, ignoring the shocked looks, "it's still time to reconsider. You've always wanted children, a traditional family. I can give you that. I've always known we were meant to be together." A heavy silence fell over the ceremony. Tyler stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Michael stopped him with a gesture. "Rebecca," Michael said firmly, "I appreciate your concern, but I ask that you respect my choice. Sarah is the woman I love, and it's with her that I want to build my life." Rebecca wouldn't give up. "You're making a mistake. A family isn't complete without biological children. It's against nature." It was at that moment that Melissa, Sarah's sister, stood up. Everyone was surprised, as Melissa was known for her shyness. "Excuse me," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I usually don't speak in public, but I can't remain silent in the face of this." Melissa looked directly at Rebecca before continuing. "I'm also infertile. I found out at 25. I thought I would never find someone who would accept me this way. But I did. My husband and I have been together for 5 years, and we're in the process of adopting a wonderful little girl." Sarah looked at her sister, shocked. Melissa had never shared this with her. Tears began to stream down her face. "A family," Melissa continued, "isn't defined by reproductive capacity, but by the love we share. What you're saying not only offends my sister and Michael, but all people who, like me, have found other ways to build a family." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The entire inn fell silent, absorbing Melissa's words. Rebecca, not knowing how to respond, mumbled an apology and quickly left the ceremony. Mrs. Catherine, Michael's mother, slowly stood up. Her normally austere face showed signs of emotion. I need to say something too," she said, her voice breaking. "Michael, Sarah, I haven't been fair to you, especially to you, Sarah." All eyes turned to the elegant lady. "All my life I was raised believing that a woman has the duty to continue the family, to produce heirs. When I learned of your condition, Sarah, my first reaction was rejection, not because I don't like you, but because I was taught to value certain traditions above all else." Michael held Sarah's hand tighter, both surprised by the confession. "But hearing Melissa's story, I realize how narrow my vision has been. I ask forgiveness from both of you, and If you'll still have me, I'd like to support you in whatever path you choose for your family." That moment completely transformed the ceremony. What started as a disaster became a profound celebration of acceptance and love. Sarah, moved, embraced Melissa, thanking her for her courage. Michael hugged his mother, breaking years of formality between them. The celebration continued, now with a different energy, more authentic. Sarah and Michael exchanged their vows, promising love, understanding, and partnership, regardless of the challenges that lay ahead. When they were finally declared united, the small group of guests applauded with genuine enthusiasm. During the party that followed, Sarah pulled Melissa to a quiet corner. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked, still processing her sister's revelation. Melissa shrugged, a gesture that reminded Sarah of their shared adolescence. "You were always the strong one, the successful one. I didn't want to seem weak in your eyes, and then I just never found the right moment." "I never thought you were weak," Sarah said, hugging her sister. "On the contrary, you've always been my example of quiet courage." The sisters remained embraced for a long moment, healing wounds they didn't even know existed. The night progressed, with music, dancing, and sincere conversations. Sarah watched Michael animatedly conversing with her father and felt a wave of gratitude. Despite all the obstacles, something new and beautiful was emerging from that painful experience. At the end of the party, when most of the guests had already left, Michael and Sarah walked hand in hand along the beach. The moonlight illuminated the path while the soft sound of the waves created the perfect soundtrack for the moment. "It was a perfect day despite everything," Sarah commented, resting her head on her now husband's shoulder. "More than perfect," Michael agreed. "It was real, honest. That's how I want our life together." They stopped to look at the stars, which seemed especially bright that night. "Do you think we'll make it?" Sarah asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Build our family in our own way." Michael gently kissed her forehead. "I'm sure of it. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." That night, under the stars of Cape Cod, Sarah and Michael sealed their commitment not only to each other, but to the future they would build together, regardless of the obstacles. The months that followed brought new challenges for the couple. Back in Boston, they decided to live in Sarah's apartment in Riverside, while looking for a larger place that could accommodate the family they dreamed of forming. Sarah received an unexpected proposal at work to lead a new project, restoring historic buildings in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was an extraordinary opportunity, which would require frequent travel for at least a year. "It's the project of your dreams," Michael said when she told him the news. "You have to accept. But we just got married. I don't want to be away from you. We won't really be apart. I can work remotely some weeks a month and stay with you in New Orleans. During other periods, you can come to Boston. We'll make it work." Sarah, moved by the unconditional support, accepted the project. Her first trip to New Orleans was scheduled for the end of the month. However, before they could implement their plan of alternating meetings between Boston and New Orleans, Michael received devastating news. The consulting firm where he worked was closing its Boston branch, and he would be laid off along with dozens of colleagues. "Don't worry," Sarah reassured him when he came home with the news. "You're brilliant, you'll find something quickly, and we have our savings." But reality proved more difficult. The market was in recession, and opportunities for financial consultants were scarce. Michael, accustomed to being the provider, began to feel the weight of the situation. "Maybe you should turn down the project in New Orleans," he suggested during dinner a few weeks later. "It doesn't make sense for us to be separated now. I need to focus on job hunting here in Boston." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. She had worked all her life for an opportunity like this. "Michael, you yourself said it's the project of my dreams. And financially, it makes even more sense now. The salary is almost double what I earn here." "So that's what it's about? Money?" Michael asked, his voice revealing hurt. "Of course not. It's about not abandoning our dreams. You didn't abandon yours for me, even when you discovered about my condition. Why should I abandon mine now?" The silence that followed was tense. Eventually, Michael sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm letting my pride speak louder. Go to New Orleans, make your project shine. I'll sort out my situation here." Despite the apparent resolution, Sarah left for New Orleans with a heavy heart. The first weeks were intense, with long working days getting to know the local team, visiting the historic sites, and developing initial plans for the restoration. Michael and she talked every day by video call, but it was noticeable that something had changed. He seemed more distant, less enthusiastic, even when talking about some job interviews he had managed to get. When Sarah returned to Boston for a weekend after a month in New Orleans, she found Michael different. He had lost weight, the apartment was untidy, and he seemed to have lost some of his characteristic spark. "What's going on, love?" she asked, concerned. "Nothing much. I'm just tired of knocking on closed doors. Today, I received another rejection for a position I thought I had in the bag." Sarah sat beside him on the couch, holding his hands. "Are you thinking of giving up?" Michael gave a bitter laugh. "Give up? No, but I might need to change fields. A friend offered me a position at a startup. The salary is much lower than what I was earning, and the position is well below my level of experience, but at least it's something." Sarah could feel the humiliation in his words, and her heart broke a little. Michael had always been so confident, so sure of his professional value. "If it's an opportunity for growth, it's worth considering," she said carefully. "But don't underestimate yourself. You have a lot to offer, and the company that hires you will be lucky." Michael smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "How's New Orleans?" he asked, changing the subject. Sarah hesitated, not wanting to seem too enthusiastic about her work when Michael was going through a difficult time. But he insisted. "I really want to know. You don't need to downplay your achievements, for my sake." Reluctantly, Sarah began to tell him about the project, the challenges, the interesting discoveries in the historic buildings of the French Quarter. Gradually, her natural enthusiasm emerged, and she found herself talking animatedly about future plans. Michael watched her with a mixture of pride and something else harder to define. When she finished, he kissed her softly. "I'm so proud of you. I always knew you would go far." That weekend, they tried to rebuild the intimacy that distance had affected. They toured Boston like tourists, dined at their favorite restaurant in Beacon Hill, made love like in the early days of their relationship. For a moment, it seemed that everything would be all right. But on Monday, when Sarah was preparing to return to New Orleans, the tension returned. Michael, apparently without reason, started an argument about schedules, about when she would return, about how he felt abandoned. "You're being unfair," Sarah finally said, hurt. "I'm working hard for both of us, for our future." "Our future or your future?" Michael retorted, the words coming out before he could contain them. Sarah froze as if she had been slapped. "That's not fair," she said, her voice trembling. "You know that everything I do thinking of us." Michael ran his hands over his face, remorseful. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It's just that everything is so different from what we imagined. You distant, me unemployed. It's not how we planned our life together." Sarah approached, hugging him. "Life rarely follows our plans, but we're together, and that's what matters. We'll overcome this, like we've overcome everything so far." When Sarah returned to New Orleans, she carried an additional worry. Her marriage, still so recent, was already being tested in ways she hadn't foreseen. Infertility, which seemed to be the biggest obstacle, was now just one of several challenges. It was during her third week into this new phase in New Orleans that something unexpected happened. Sarah was inspecting an old mansion in the historic center when she noticed a girl of about 9 years old watching her with curiosity. The girl, with brown skin and curly hair tied in colorful braids, was holding a sketchbook. "Hi," Sarah said, smiling. "Do you live around here?" The girl, shy, nodded. "My name is Sarah. And yours?" "Amara," the girl answered quietly. "That's a beautiful name, Amara. What are you drawing?" Hesitantly, Amara showed her notebook, to Sarah's surprise. It was a detailed drawing of the very mansion she was inspecting. "You drew this? It's incredible. You captured all the details of the facade." A shy smile illuminated Amara's face. "I like drawing old houses. Did you know I'm an architect? I also draw houses, but yours are much better than mine." In the following days, to Sarah's surprise, Amara began to appear at the locations where she worked. The girl always brought her sketchbook, silently observing while Sarah measured, photographed, and made notes. Occasionally, they talked about architecture, drawing, and about the history of New Orleans. Sarah discovered that Amara lived with her grandmother, Mrs. Josephine, an elderly lady who sold homemade pastries at a nearby stand. Amara's parents had separated, and her mother worked as a domestic employee in a family house in another neighborhood, visiting her daughter on weekends. "Don't you go to school?" Sarah asked one day, concerned about the constant visits during school hours. "I do," Amara explained. "I study in the morning. I come to see you after." In a short time, a routine was established. Amara would appear after school. Sarah would teach her basic principles of architectural drawing, and then accompany her to her grandmother's pastry stand before returning to her rented apartment. When Michael came to visit New Orleans, as he had promised, Sarah was eager to introduce him to Amara. "She's amazing, Michael. She has a natural talent for drawing and a curiosity that reminds me of myself at her age." Michael smiled, seeing his wife's enthusiasm. "Sounds like you found a mini Sarah." The meeting between the three happened on a sunny Saturday. They had arranged to walk around the French Quarter, and Amara would serve as an unofficial tour guide, showing them her favorite places. Seeing Michael interacting with Amara was a revelation for Sarah. He, who had always been good with children, found an immediate connection with the girl. Together they made jokes, invented stories about the residents of the old mansions, and shared a huge cotton candy. That night, as they prepared for bed in the small rented apartment, Sarah noticed that Michael seemed lighter, closer to the man she had met. "I really liked Amara," he commented as he lay down. "She reminds me of you, you know. Not just the interest in architecture, but the intensity, the curiosity." Sarah felt a wave of emotion. It was the first time in months that she had seen Michael, genuinely excited about something. "She's special," she agreed. "She's been keeping me company here. Sometimes I think I'm the one learning from her, not the other way around." An idea began to form in Sarah's mind, but it was too early to verbalize it. Still, that night, for the first time since the wedding, she fell asleep with a sense of renewed hope. The weekend passed too quickly, and soon Michael was returning to Boston. Before leaving, he surprised Sarah with a set of professional drawing materials. "It's for Amara," he explained. "I thought you could use them in your improvised lessons." Sarah hugged him, moved by her husband's sensitivity. Even amid his own difficulties, he still found space to think of others. When she gave the gift to Amara the next day, the girl's reaction almost broke her heart. First, eyes wide with surprise, then silent tears streaming down her small face. "No one has ever given me a present like this," Amara murmured, caressing. "The case of professional colored pencils." "You deserve it," Sarah said simply. In that moment, something changed inside her. A feeling she had never experienced before, a protective instinct, a desire to ensure that this child had everything she needed to shine. Could this be what people called maternal instinct? Amara's visits became the highlight of Sarah's days in New Orleans. Together they explored the city. Drew talked about the future. Sarah began teaching Amara about perspective, proportion, and other more advanced drawing concepts, impressed with how quickly the girl learned. During their nightly video calls, Michael noticed the change in Sarah. "You seem happier," he commented one night. "Your eyes are shining again." "It's Amara," Sarah admitted. "She's brought something new to my life, a sense of purpose beyond work." Michael smiled, understanding. "I think I get it. I've been feeling something similar." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, curious. "Remember my friend Ryan from the startup? He has a 10-year-old son, Matthew. I started helping the boy with math on weekends. He struggles in school, and Ryan doesn't have the time or patience to help him." Sarah smiled, feeling an even deeper connection with her husband. "We're naturals at this, aren't we? Connecting with children." "Maybe it's a sign," Michael suggested cautiously. They didn't need to say more. Both knew they were beginning to seriously consider the possibility of adoption. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. However, not everything was smooth. During her next visit to Boston, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Rebecca, Michael's ex-girlfriend, who had tried to sabotage the ceremony in Cape Cod. "We need to talk," Rebecca said, her voice urgent. "It's about Michael." Sarah hesitated. Her instinct told her to hang up, but curiosity prevailed. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "To meet. I have information you need to know before it's too late." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed to meet her at a busy cafe in Back Bay. She didn't tell Michael about the meeting, fearing his reaction. Rebecca arrived punctually, dressed elegantly as always, but with visible dark circles under her impeccable makeup. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting across from Sarah. "Be direct, please. What do you want?" Rebecca took a deep breath before speaking. "Do you know why Michael and I broke up years ago?" Sarah shook her head negatively. Michael had never gone into details, only mentioned that it didn't work out. "We broke up because I got pregnant, and he wanted me to get rid of the baby." Sarah felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. This didn't make sense. Michael had always talked about wanting children, about how important family was to him. "You're lying," Sarah said, her voice firmer than she felt. "Why would I lie?" "I'm trying to help you, Sarah. Michael isn't who you think he is. He says he wants children, but when the responsibility was really there, he ran away, just like he ran from the altar when you revealed your infertility." Sarah felt dizzy. Part of her wanted to believe it was all a lie, a manipulation from a resentful ex-girlfriend, but another part feared it might be true. "What happened to the baby?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Rebecca's face changed, a shadow passing over her eyes. "I lost it, naturally, weeks after we broke up, but that doesn't change the fact that he didn't want to take responsibility." Sarah rose abruptly. "I need to go." "Wait, Sarah, there's more." But Sarah was already leaving the cafe, desperately needing air. Rebecca's words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of Michael talking about family, about children, about the future. She walked aimlessly along the harbor walk, trying to order her thoughts. Should she confront Michael? Believe Rebecca? How to distinguish truth from manipulation? When she finally returned to the apartment, Michael was preparing dinner, smiling, when he saw her enter. "Where were you? I tried to call you." Sarah put her bag on the sofa, still uncertain about how to proceed. "We need to talk, Michael." His smile disappeared, replaced by concern. "What happened? Did something happen in New Orleans?" "No, it's not about New Orleans." Sarah took a deep breath. "It's about Rebecca. I met with her today." Michael visibly tensed, his face paling. "Why?" "She reached out to me, said she had something important to tell me." Michael turned off the stove and sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Sarah to continue. "She told me that you broke up because she got pregnant. And you didn't want to take responsibility." Michael closed his eyes, an expression of pain crossing his face. "She told you about the pregnancy." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Sarah felt her heart sink. So it was true. "Why did you never tell me?" Michael opened his eyes, looking at her intensely. "Because it didn't happen the way she said. Yes, Rebecca got pregnant, but she didn't tell me immediately. When she finally did, she also confessed that the child might not be mine." Sarah frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Rebecca was cheating on me, Sarah, with a mutual friend. When she told me about the pregnancy, she also revealed the affair. I was devastated, angry. Yes, I suggested she consider all options, including terminating the pregnancy, not because I didn't want the baby, but because we didn't even know if it was mine and our relationship was clearly over." A wave of relief went through Sarah, mixed with compassion for the pain that Michael clearly still felt when remembering that period. "She said she lost the baby afterward." Michael nodded, sadness in his eyes. "A few weeks after we broke up, she called to tell me. I went to the hospital, but she didn't want to see me. It was the last time we had contact until she showed up at our ceremony in Cape Cod." Sarah moved closer, sitting next to him. "Why do you think she did this? Seeking me out, now after so long?" Michael shook his head. I don't know. Maybe she still hasn't gotten over it. Maybe she really believes her version of the story. Or maybe, he hesitated, maybe she still wants to separate me from you. Sarah thought about everything they had been through, the difficulties, the discoveries, the path they were building together. She failed, she said simply, taking Michael's hand in hers. That night marked another turning point in their relationship. Michael's honesty, even about such a painful subject, strengthened Sarah's trust. The shadow of Rebecca, which had hung over them since the ceremony in Cape Cod, finally began to dissipate. When Sarah returned to New Orleans, she carried with her a new determination. Her relationship with Amara continued to flourish, and the idea that had begun to form in her mind was now clearer. One afternoon, while helping Amara with a particularly complex drawing, she asked casually, "Amara, have you ever thought about what you want to be when you grow up?" The girl smiled without taking her eyes off the paper. "I want to be an architect like you." Sarah felt a wave of emotion. "You would be an amazing architect. You already have so much talent." Amara finally looked at her, her dark eyes shining. "Do you really think so?" "I'm certain. In fact, I was thinking, would you like to come to Boston one day? Visit the office where I normally work, see some projects?" Amara's face lit up like Sarah had never seen before. "Can I? Would Grandma let me? We can talk to her, and to your mother, of course." That night, Sarah talked with Michael via video call, telling him about the invitation she had made to Amara. "I think it's wonderful," Michael said, enthusiastic. "I can take her to meet Matthew, too. They're close in age. Maybe they'll get along." Something in Michael's tone, in the way his eyes sparkled when talking about bringing the children together, made Sarah realize he was thinking the same thing she was. "Michael," she began, hesitant, "have you thought, we mentioned it before, but never really discussed." "Adoption?" Michael completed, a smile slowly forming on his face. Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "I've been thinking a lot about it, especially since I met Amara." Michael adjusted himself in his chair, leaning closer to the camera. "I've been thinking about it too. In fact, I did some preliminary research on the process in the US. Sarah felt a wave of relief and excitement. "You really did? Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to have more information before bringing it up, and honestly, I wasn't sure if you were ready for that step yet." "I think I am," Sarah said, surprised by her own conviction. "Actually, I'm sure I am." They talked for hours that night, sharing hopes, fears, and plans for the future. Michael had discovered that the adoption process in the US could be lengthy and bureaucratic, but not impossible. They would have to go through psychological evaluations, home visits, preparatory courses, and a series of interviews. "It's worth it," Sarah declared. "All of it is worth it." In the following weeks, they discreetly began gathering information and preparing the necessary documentation to start the process. Michael finally accepted the position at the startup, which, although it paid less, offered a more flexible schedule that would be useful during the adoption process. Meanwhile, Sarah began to carefully discuss with Mrs. Josephine, Amara's grandmother, about the possibility of the girl visiting Boston. At first, the lady was reserved, suspicious of the intentions of a woman from the big city, but over time, seeing the genuine bond between Sarah and her granddaughter, she began to open up to the idea. Amara's mother, Destiny, was even more cautious. When she finally found time to meet with Sarah on a Sunday, she asked many questions about her intentions. "My daughter talks a lot about you," Destiny said, watching Sarah carefully. "Says she wants to be like you when she grows up." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility in her words. "Amara is an extraordinary girl. She has a natural talent that deserves to be cultivated. I would just like to show her possibilities, broader horizons." Destiny smiled for the first time, a tired smile of someone who worked hard every day. "Horizons. That's what I've always wanted to give her, but life doesn't always cooperate." Throughout the conversation, Sarah learned more about Destiny's situation. She worked as a live-in domestic worker, returning home only on weekends. Amara's father had disappeared even before his daughter's birth. It was a constant struggle to ensure the basics. "If you really want to help my daughter," Destiny finally said. "I won't stop you, but promise you won't abandon her afterward. Amara has had too many disappointments for a child." Sarah felt the gravity of the promise she was about to make. "I won't abandon her. On the contrary, I want to be a constant presence in her life, if you'll allow it." With the reluctant blessing of Destiny and Mrs. Josephine, Amara's visit to Boston was scheduled for the next month, coinciding with a school holiday. Sarah and Michael meticulously prepared to receive the girl. They transformed the guest room with colorful details, bought additional drawing materials, and planned an itinerary that included visits to museums, parks, and, of course, interesting architectural buildings. When the day finally arrived, Sarah went to pick up Amara at Logan Airport. The girl, who had never flown before, came down the boarding bridge with eyes wide with excitement and a little fear. "You really came to get me," she said when she saw Sarah, as if she couldn't believe it. "Of course I came. We've been counting the days. Michael is waiting at home, preparing a special lunch for you." The weekend passed like a dream. Amara absorbed each new experience with enthusiasm. The Freedom Trail, Faneuil Hall, Harvard's architecture, the Boston Public Garden. Michael and she developed an immediate complicity, inventing games and inside jokes that even Sarah had difficulty following. At the architecture firm, Sarah's colleagues were impressed with Amara's talent. One of them, a gentleman near retirement, even suggested a mentoring program for young talents, with Amara as the first beneficiary. The connection with Matthew, the son of Michael's friend, was also immediate. Although Amara was a few months older, they discovered common interests in cartoons and games. When it was time for Amara to return to New Orleans, both she and Sarah had tears in their eyes. "Can I come back?" the girl asked at the airport, clinging to Sarah's hand. "Whenever you want. And soon, maybe we can discuss something more permanent." Sarah didn't want to elaborate, not wanting to create premature expectations, but in her heart, she knew they had found the beginning of a new path for their family. Back in New Orleans, Sarah threw herself into work with renewed energy. The restoration project was progressing well, and her boss was already talking about extending her stay in the city for a few more months. The idea, which would have previously enthused her professionally, now generated mixed feelings. On one hand, more time in New Orleans meant more time with Amara. On the other, it meant prolonging the separation from Michael. It was during a particularly hot afternoon of work that Sarah received an unexpected call from Michael. "I have news," he said, his voice filled with emotion. 2 pieces of news, actually. Sarah sat down, preparing herself for what would come next. "The first is that I got a new job, a financial consulting position at a tech company. The salary is better than at the startup, and it has scheduling flexibility." "Michael, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you. But the second news is even bigger. I received a call from the adoption service. We've been approved in the first phase of evaluation." Sarah felt dizzy with emotion. They had started the process just 2 months ago, expecting it would take much longer for any progress. It means that now we start the home visits, the more in-depth interviews. We're on the path, Sarah." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak, overcome with emotion. When she finally found her voice, she asked, "When is the first visit? I need to be there. In 3 weeks, can you make it? I'll talk to my boss tomorrow. Nothing will stop me from being there for this." That night, Sarah could barely sleep. Thoughts and emotions swirled in her mind. The adoption process was moving faster than they expected. What would this mean for her work in New Orleans, for her relationship with Amara? She had told the girl about their plans to adopt, but not in detail. How would she react? The next morning, Sarah sought out her boss to discuss the situation. To her surprise, he was extremely understanding. "Family is important, Sarah. We can adjust the schedule to accommodate your trips to Boston, and when the project here is finished, who knows, we might find a way for you to continue working remotely on some aspects." Relieved, Sarah thanked him. Now came the more difficult conversation with Amara. They had arranged to meet that afternoon after school. Sarah chose a small cafe near Mrs. Josephine's house, a quiet place where they could talk without interruptions. Amara arrived radiant as always, her sketchbook under her arm. "I have something to show you," she said, barely containing her excitement. "I drew the mansion on 15th Street, the one we visited last week, with all the corrections you suggested." The drawing was impressive, showing an artistic maturity well beyond Amara's 9 years. Sarah sincerely praised it, but Amara, perceptive as she was, noticed that something else was on her mind. "Did something happen, Miss Sarah?" Sarah smiled at the affectionate nickname that Amara had recently adopted. "Yes, something happened, something important that I need to share with you." Carefully choosing her words precisely, Sarah explained about the adoption process, about how she and Michael had decided to open their home and their hearts to a child who needed a family. Amara listened attentively, her face serious, her large, dark eyes fixed on Sarah. "Does that mean you're going to have a child or a daughter?" "Maybe. The process can take time and we don't know yet if it will be a boy or a girl. Or maybe siblings." Amara was silent for a moment, playing with her pencil. "And you'll keep coming to New Orleans? We'll keep meeting?" Sarah's heart tightened when she realized the fear in the girl's voice. "Of course, nothing will change between us. In fact," Sarah hesitated, not wanting to create false expectations, but feeling she needed to be honest. "In fact, Michael and I were thinking of inviting you to visit Boston more frequently. Maybe spend a few weeks with us during school vacations, if your mother and grandmother allow it, of course." Amara's eyes sparkled. "Really? I could stay with you, and meet your daughter or son when you have one?" "That's right. You would be like an older sister to her or him." Amara smiled, a smile so wide and genuine that Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "I would like that a lot, Miss Sarah." In that moment, Sarah had a deep certainty that, regardless of the challenges they would still face, they were on the right path. A family didn't need to follow traditional models to be real, to be a source, to have love and support. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activities. Sarah traveled to Boston for the first home visit with the social worker from the adoption service. She and Michael spent hours cleaning and organizing the apartment, discussing how to adapt the space for a child, imagining the future. The social worker, a middle-aged woman named Beatrice, was professional but warm. "I see you've been thinking seriously about this," she commented, observing the room they had begun to prepare. "But remember that the process can be long. It's important to maintain realistic expectations." Sarah and Michael nodded, understanding the professional's caution. They knew that many couples waited years before being called to meet a child who could become part of their family. "We're prepared to wait as long as necessary," Michael assured. "We want to do everything right." Beatrice smiled, appreciating the attitude. "There are many children waiting for a loving home. Some are older, others have siblings or special needs. Would you be open to considering these cases?" Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. They had extensively discussed their preferences, deciding to keep an open mind. "We would be willing to meet children of any age," Sarah responded, "and we certainly wouldn't want to separate siblings." Something in Beatrice's gaze changed, as if she were making mental notes. "That's very good to hear. You'd be surprised. How many couples insist on newborn babies without realizing how many wonderful children are waiting for a chance?" When Beatrice left, Sarah felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The visit had gone well, but the process was just beginning. There would be more interviews, more evaluations, more waiting. Meanwhile, in New Orleans, the restoration project was entering a new phase. Sarah managed to organize her schedule to spend 3 weeks in Boston, 3 in New Orleans, minimizing the impact on her marriage and the adoption process. During her weeks in New Orleans, she and Amara continued to meet regularly. The girl was increasingly involved with architecture, beginning to study on her own fundamentals that Sarah lent her. It was during one of these meetings that Amara, surprisingly, brought up the subject of adoption again. "Miss Sarah, do you think they'll give you a baby or an older child?" Sarah smiled at the girl's curiosity. "We don't know yet. It could be a baby or a child your age or even older. The important thing is that we're the right family for them, whoever they are." Amara nodded seriously, processing the information. "And if—" She hesitated, suddenly shy. "And if you adopted more than one child, like siblings, Sarah looked at Amara, realizing what might be behind that question. We would like that very much, actually. Michael and I agreed that if the opportunity arises, we wouldn't want to separate siblings. Amara seemed to want to say something more, but held back, returning her attention to her drawing. Sarah didn't press, understanding that the girl processed information at her own pace. Weeks turned into months. The adoption process continued, with more visits, interviews with psychologists, preparatory courses for adoptive parents. Sarah and Michael participated in everything with dedication, building a support network with other couples in a similar situation. Michael finally found stability in his new job, regaining part of the confidence he had lost during the period of unemployment. Sarah, in turn, saw the project in New Orleans approaching completion, bringing the inevitable question, what would come next? It was during a celebratory dinner at the apartment, celebrating 6 months since the beginning of the adoption process, that the phone rang. Michael answered, while Sarah set the table. Hello? Yes, this is he. Yes, she's here with me. Something in Michael's voice made Sarah stop what she was doing and look at him. His face showed a mixture of shock and emotion. I understand. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. We'll be there for sure. Thank you very much, Beatrice. When he hung up, Michael stood still for a moment as if processing the information he had just received. That was Beatrice, from the adoption service, he finally said, his voice trembling. They have a situation that they think might be compatible with us. They want us to go tomorrow to talk. Sarah felt her legs weaken and had to lean on the table. So quickly? I thought it would take longer. Apparently our profile corresponds to a specific case they're trying to resolve. She didn't give details, just asked that we be prepared for a possible presentation. Presentation? You mean meeting the child? Or children? Sarah brought her hands to her face, feeling tears spring forth. They had prepared for months, perhaps years of waiting. The possibility that it could happen so quickly was both wonderful and frightening. What do we do now? She asked, suddenly feeling unprepared, despite all the courses and readings. Michael approached, enveloping her in a strong embrace. We do what we've always done. We face it together, one step at a time. That night, neither of them could sleep properly. They speculated about the child, age, gender, life history, knowing that each adoption case carried with it stories of loss and hope intertwined. The next morning, Sarah called New Orleans, explaining the situation to her boss, who wished her all the luck in the world and assured her that her job would be guaranteed, regardless of the outcome. At 2 p.m. sharp, they entered the office of the adoption service, nervous but determined. Beatrice greeted them with a gentle smile, leading them to a more private room where 2 other professionals were already present, a psychologist and another social worker. Sarah, Michael, thank you for coming so quickly, Beatrice began. As I mentioned on the phone, we have a situation that we think might be a good match for you. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand under the table, both barely breathing. It's about 2 children, Beatrice continued. Twin siblings, a boy and a girl who just turned 4 years old. They've been in a foster home for almost 2 years since they lost their mother. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. Twin siblings, so young and already having faced so much pain. You mentioned several times that you would be open to adopting siblings, the psychologist intervened. That's why we thought of you for this specific case. Keeping siblings together is always our priority, especially when it comes to twins. What are they like? Michael asked, his voice choked with emotion. The professionals exchanged glances before Beatrice continued. Jacob and Olivia are lovely children, although naturally they have some emotional issues due to what they've been through. Jacob is more reserved, takes time to trust. Olivia is more outgoing, protective of her brother. Both are healthy, intelligent, and adaptable, despite the circumstances. The other social worker placed an envelope on the table. Here are some photos if you'd like to see. We know this is very sudden, and we don't expect an immediate decision. It's just a first step, an initial presentation of the case. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were photos of 2 children with dark, curly hair, deep brown eyes, and shy smiles. In one of the photos, they were holding hands. In another, the boy, Jacob, had a serious expression, while Olivia smiled openly at the camera. Michael looked at the photos over Sarah's shoulder, and she could feel his suspended breath. "They're beautiful," Sarah whispered. "We'd like to schedule a meeting," Michael said suddenly, surprising even Sarah with his certainty. "If it's possible, if you think it's appropriate." Beatrice smiled, seeming pleased with the reaction. "We believe it would be beneficial, yes. But first, we need to discuss more details about their history, possible special needs, and the process that would follow if the initial meeting is positive." The meeting extended for 2 more hours, during which Sarah and Michael listened attentively about the children's past, their development, their likes and challenges. They asked questions, shared concerns, and mainly demonstrated willingness to learn and adapt to whatever was necessary. At the end, a first meeting was scheduled for the following week, in a neutral environment, a park near the foster home where the children were staying. It would be a brief, supervised interaction, just a first step in what could become a journey of gradual approximation. When they left the office, Sarah and Michael walked in silence for a few blocks, each absorbed in their own thoughts. "It's really happening," Sarah finally said, her voice almost inaudible. "Yes, it is. And quickly." Michael stopped walking, turning to face her. "Are you ready for this? Really ready?" Sarah reflected for a moment. She thought about the long road they had traveled, the revelation at the altar, the reconciliation, the professional challenges, the bond with Amara. Each stage had been a preparation for this moment, even when they didn't know it. "I'm ready," she answered with conviction. "And you?" Michael smiled, that smile she had learned to love years ago during their college days. "More ready than I've ever been for anything in my life." They sealed the moment with a kiss, right there on the busy sidewalk of downtown Boston, not caring about the glances from passers-by. It was a kiss that symbolized not only their love for each other, but also the love they were ready to offer to 2 children who, without knowing it yet, could become part of their family. The week that followed passed in a blur of activities. Adjustments to the apartment, purchases of basic items that might be needed in the future, endless conversations about how to approach the first meeting. Sarah had to postpone her return to New Orleans, explaining the situation to her boss, who continued to be understanding and supportive. On the day scheduled to meet Jacob and Olivia, Sarah woke before dawn, too nervous to go back to sleep. Michael wasn't much different, repeating for the 10th time the list of things they had decided to bring. Healthy snacks, some simple toys, a blanket to sit on in the park. "What if they don't like us?" Sarah asked when they were on their way to the agreed location. Michael, despite his own nervousness, smiled. "Then we'll give them time. We can't force a connection. We need to respect their pace." They arrived at the park half an hour before the scheduled time. It was a quiet place with a playground area, many trees and space to run. They chose a bench near the location indicated by Beatrice and waited, watching other families with their children, imagining what it would be like if one day they were there as a family too. Finally, Beatrice appeared, accompanied by another woman and the 2 children whose photos they had memorized over the last few days. Jacob was firmly holding the social worker's hand, while Olivia walked a bit ahead, curiously looking around. Sarah and Michael stood up, trying to appear calm, although their hearts were beating furiously. Beatrice signaled for them to approach slowly. "Jacob, Olivia," she said in a gentle voice, "these are Sarah and Michael, the people we told you about. They really wanted to meet you." Olivia was the first to react, taking a step forward and analyzing the adults with perceptive eyes. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi, Olivia," Sarah responded, kneeling down to be at the girl's height. "We're very happy to meet you and your brother." Jacob remained half hidden behind the social worker, watching cautiously. Michael, sensing the boy's shyness, didn't attempt a direct approach. "We brought some snacks," he commented casually, "and I thought maybe we could take a walk around the park if you'd like." Olivia nodded vigorously, while Jacob finally came out from behind the social worker, still holding her hand but showing interest. The first few minutes were awkward, as expected. Sarah and Michael tried not to bombard the children with questions or excessive attention, following the guidance they had received. Gradually, As they walked through the park, the tension began to decrease. Olivia was indeed talkative, explaining to Michael in impressive detail how the park swing worked and why she preferred the yellow slide to the blue one. Jacob, meanwhile, stayed close to Sarah, watching her with curious eyes whenever he thought she wasn't looking. It was during a quiet moment, while they were sitting on the blankets spread on the grass sharing the snacks they had brought, that Jacob finally spoke directly to Sarah. "Do you like to draw?" he asked, his voice so low that she almost didn't hear it. Sarah smiled, genuinely surprised and touched. "I like it very much. I'm an architect, so I spend a lot of time drawing buildings and houses." Jacob's eyes lit up a little. "I like to draw too. I draw different houses with many windows." Sarah felt a tightness in her heart, immediately remembering Amara and her love for drawing. What a meaningful coincidence. "Maybe someday you can show me your drawings," she gently suggested. "I can also show you some of mine." Jacob nodded seriously, before returning his attention to the sandwich in his hands. The meeting, planned to last only an hour, extended for almost 2, with Beatrice discreetly observing the interactions. When it finally came time to say goodbye, Olivia surprised everyone by running to hug Michael. "Will you come back another day?" she asked, looking up with expectation. Michael, visibly moved, assured her that yes, if she and Jacob wanted. Jacob didn't offer a hug, but waved shyly to Sarah when they were leaving. On the way back home, Sarah and Michael could barely articulate words, overwhelmed by the experience. "Did you see when he talked about drawing?" Sarah finally said. "And all the stories Olivia told about the books she likes? They're amazing. Children, Michael." "They're perfect," Michael agreed, tears in his eyes. "Simply perfect." In the days and weeks that followed, the meetings with Jacob and Olivia became more frequent and longer. They began to include visits to museums, the zoo, the cinema. Each new experience strengthened the bond that was forming between them. Jacob, initially so reserved, began to eagerly await the meetings, especially after Sarah brought a professional set of colored pencils, similar to what she had given to Amara. Olivia, in turn, loved the stories that Michael invented, always, starring a brave girl strikingly similar to her. Sarah finally managed to return to New Orleans to organize her work, explaining the situation to Amara with care and honesty. "They're 4 years old," she told her, showing photos of Jacob and Olivia. "And if all goes well, in a few months they might come to live with us permanently." Amara looked at the photos with curiosity. "The boy looks serious, like you when you're concentrated." Sarah laughed, surprised by the perceptive observation. "He is serious, yes, but he's starting to open up. Do you know what he likes? Drawing, just like you." Amara's eyes sparkled. "Really? I could teach him some things when they come to live with you. And when I visit." "He would love that," Sarah assured, moved by the girl's acceptance. Sarah hugged Amara, moved by the girl's generosity. That moment confirmed what she already suspected. Amara would be an important presence in the life they were building. "Miss Sarah," Amara asked after a moment, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, dear." "If you adopt Jacob and Olivia, will I still be important to you?" The question hit Sarah like lightning. She realized then that Amara, despite her apparent maturity, was still a child who had already experienced losses and abandonment. "Amara, look at me." Sarah gently held the girl's face between her hands. "You will always be important. Always. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Having Jacob and Olivia in my life doesn't mean having less space for you. It means having a bigger family, where you have a special place that no one can ever take." Amara's eyes shone with contained tears, but a shy smile appeared on her lips. "Promise?" "I promise. And you know I always keep my promises." That night, Sarah called Michael, telling him about the conversation with Amara. "We need to make sure. She feels part of all this," Sarah said. "She's afraid of being left behind." "I completely agree," Michael responded. "In fact, I've been thinking about something. What do you think about inviting Amara to participate in one of our meetings? With the twins?" "If Beatrice approves, of course." "Michael, that would be wonderful. Do you think Beatrice would allow it?" "It doesn't hurt to ask. After all, if everything goes well, Amara will be part of these children's lives in one way or another." Surprisingly, Beatrice not only approved the idea, but considered it potentially beneficial for Jacob and Olivia. Having an older child as a mediator can help them feel more secure, she explained, as long as the interaction is supervised and well prepared. That's how 2 weeks later, Amara traveled again to Boston, this time with a special purpose. Sarah and Destiny, Amara's mother, had talked at length by phone, and the woman, seeing how much the opportunity meant to her daughter, agreed to the trip. The meeting was scheduled for a sunny Saturday, in the same park where Sarah and Michael had first met the twins. Sarah and Amara arrived early, and the girl was visibly nervous. "What if they don't like me?" she asked, unconsciously echoing the same concern that Sarah had had weeks before. "They'll love you," Sarah assured. "Just be yourself. And remember what we talked about. Jacob is shyer, so he might take a while to open up." When Michael arrived, with the twins accompanied by Beatrice, Amara partially hid behind Sarah, suddenly shy. Olivia, as always, was the first to approach, curious about the new person. "Hi, who are you?" she asked directly. "I'm Amara," she answered in a low voice. "I'm Olivia. That's my brother, Jacob. He doesn't talk much." Amara smiled, relaxing. "A bit. That's okay, sometimes I don't talk much either." The ice was broken when Amara, remembering what Sarah had said, took her sketchbook from her backpack and asked Jacob if he wanted to see. The boy, interested, cautiously approached, and soon the three were sitting on the grass with Amara showing her drawings of buildings and patiently explaining some basic techniques to Jacob. Olivia, although less interested in drawing, was fascinated with the colorful braids in Amara's hair and soon asked to learn how to make them. Sarah and Michael observed the scene with emotion, exchanging significant glances. Something special was happening there, something that transcended their most optimistic expectations. "They're getting along well," Beatrice commented, also observing. "Amara has a natural way with children." The day passed quickly, with picnics, games on the playground, and many stories. When it was time to say goodbye, Jacob, who was normally reserved in his displays of affection, timidly extended a drawing to Amara. "I made it for you," he said, almost inaudibly. "It's the house where you live." It was a simple drawing, but made with evident care. A house with many windows, exactly as he had described liking to draw. "It's beautiful, Jacob," Amara responded, genuinely touched. "I'll keep it forever." On the way back to the apartment, Amara couldn't stop talking about the twins, about how talented Jacob was and how funny and brave Olivia was. "They're going to be your children, aren't they, Miss Sarah?" she finally asked. "We hope so. There are still many steps in the process, but we're confident." "They'll be very lucky," Amara declared, with the absolute certainty that only a child can have. "You're the best parents in the world." The words, said with such simplicity and conviction, touched Sarah deeply. She and Michael were not yet officially parents, but they were already seen as such by someone who mattered a lot. In the weeks that followed, the adoption process advanced at a steady pace. The visitation stage intensified, with Jacob and Olivia spending entire weekends at Sarah and Michael's apartment, getting to know the house routine, establishing deeper bonds. Amara returned to New Orleans, but maintained regular contact through video calls, often talking with the twins. A genuine friendship was blossoming between them, despite the distance and age difference. Sarah finally concluded the project in New Orleans, receiving praise for her exceptional work and an offer to lead new restoration projects in other cities. After much reflection and conversations with Michael, she decided to remain at the Boston office, assuming the coordination of a team that would work on architectural heritage preservation projects in the Boston area. "I'm very proud of you," Michael said when she told him her decision. "I know how much the project in New Orleans meant to you." "It meant a lot," Sarah agreed. "But now we have another priority. I want to be here present when Jacob and Olivia come to live with us. I want to build this new phase side by side with you." Michael, who had found stability in his new job, also reorganized his routine, negotiating more flexible hours that would allow greater involvement in the children's adaptation. It was on a Thursday morning, almost 6 months after the first meeting in the park, that the long-awaited phone call finally came. Temporary custody of Jacob and Olivia had been granted. to Sarah and Michael. The children could move permanently to the apartment within a week. The news triggered a rush of final preparations. The children's room, which had been gradually assembled, received the finishing touches. Sarah insisted on personally painting a wall with a colorful mural inspired by Jacob's drawings and the fantastic stories that Olivia loved. Michael, in turn, organized a small celebration for the day of arrival, inviting only those closest. His parents, who had significantly evolved in their acceptance of the situation. Sarah's parents, Melissa, whose own adoption had finally been completed, and some friends who had been pillars of support throughout the process. Amara, unfortunately, could not come for the occasion, but Sarah ensured that she participated virtually, planning a special visit for the next school vacation. The big day finally arrived. Sarah and Michael went to pick up Jacob and Olivia at the foster home, helping them pack their few personal belongings. The goodbyes were emotional. Despite the difficulties, that place and the people who worked there had been the only constancy in the children's lives in recent years. "You can always come back to visit," assured the director of the institution, an elderly lady with grey hair who hugged each child with genuine affection. "And we hope you'll send us many photos." The car ride to the apartment was quiet. Jacob looked out the window, apparently absorbing the change in his life. Olivia, normally chatty, firmly held her brother's hand, as if seeking and offering strength simultaneously. When they arrived at the building in Riverside, Michael parked and turned to look at the back seat. "Welcome home," he said simply. Olivia smiled shyly, while Jacob merely nodded, his large eyes carefully observing everything. The small celebration awaiting in the apartment was carefully planned not to overwhelm the children. A table with colorful snacks, discreet balloons, and well-chosen gifts, books, educational games, art materials. Nothing excessive, nothing that could generate anxiety. The initial adaptation was not without challenges. In the first nights, both children had difficulty sleeping, with Olivia often waking up frightened and seeking her brother. Sarah and Michael took turns, offering comfort, reading stories, assuring them they were safe. During the day, Jacob spent hours drawing, his refuge when emotions became too intense. Olivia, more expressive, alternated between moments of exuberant joy and sudden crying spells, constantly testing the limits and permanence of her new parents' love. "It's normal," Beatrice assured during one of her follow-up visits. "They're processing years of insecurity and changes. The most important thing is that you're present and consistent." And they were. Michael reorganized his work hours to be home every afternoon. Sarah, with her new position, managed to establish a hybrid work scheme, alternating days at the office and at home. Gradually, a routine began to establish itself. Breakfast together every morning, Michael taking the children to the nearby school, where they had been enrolled, Sarah picking them up in the afternoon and supervising homework, before drawing sessions with Jacob or games invented by Olivia. Video calls with Amara became an important part of this routine. On Wednesdays after dinner, the twins eagerly waited to show their progress in drawing or tell about their adventures at the new school. "You're coming to visit us on vacation, aren't you?" Olivia invariably asked at the end of each call. "Definitely." Amara always responded, equally eager for the reunion. The first major test came after 2 months when Jacob fell ill with a strong flu. Seeing him feverish, vulnerable, brought to the surface all of Sarah and Michael's fears and insecurities as new parents. "What if it gets worse? What if it's something more serious?" Sarah questioned, worried, while holding the sleeping boy's hand. "We're doing everything right," Michael assured, although he himself was visibly concerned. "The doctor said it's just the flu, he'll get better." The illness, although worrying, ended up strengthening the family bonds. Jacob, in his fragility, allowed himself to be cared for, accepting the affection and attention without the usual reservations. Olivia, always protective, helped bring water and tell stories to her brother, taking an active role in the care. When Jacob finally recovered, something had subtly changed. He began to call Sarah Mom for the first time, albeit timidly. Olivia, who had already adopted Dad for Michael, followed suit, and the word Mum officially entered the house vocabulary. The first time Sarah heard that word from Jacob's lips, she felt as if her heart might explode. Something deep and ancestral awakened within her, a protective and loving instinct that transcended biology or genetics. "He called me Mum," she told. Michael, that night, still amazed. "I never thought a simple word could mean so much." Michael hugged her, moved. "We're a family now, a real family." With the arrival of school vacation, Amara could finally visit Boston. The twins, now almost 5 years old, awaited her arrival with almost feverish excitement. Sarah and Michael had reorganized the guest room especially for her, including a desk with drawing materials, so she could continue her projects even during the visit. Amara's arrival was marked by enthusiastic hugs and a torrent of words from Olivia, eager to show every corner of the house and every new toy. Jacob, more restrained, waited his turn for a silent but deeply felt hug. "I brought something for you," Amara announced, opening her backpack. For Olivia, a set of colorful hair ribbons handmade by Mrs. Josephine. For Jacob, a handcrafted notebook with a leather cover, bought with her own savings at the artisanal market in New Orleans. "For your special drawings," she explained, as the boy caressed the soft cover with reverence. The days that followed were filled with activities: visits to the Boston Public Garden, walks along the harbor, joint drawing sessions, where Amara patiently taught new techniques to Jacob, while Olivia, although less interested in drawing, participated in her own way, coloring with enthusiasm. Sarah watched in wonder at the dynamic between the children. Amara, at 10 years old, naturally assumed the role of older sister, alternating between playful and protective, sharing knowledge and discovering new ways to connect with the twins. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. During that visit, an unexpected event brought important issues to the surface. During a walk through the mall, they encountered Rebecca, Michael's ex-girlfriend. She was accompanied by a man and, surprisingly, a small child of about 2 years old. The initial encounter was uncomfortable, with Rebecca clearly surprised to see Michael with Sarah and 3 children. After tense introductions, while the children admired a nearby shop window under Amara's supervision, Rebecca pulled Sarah aside. "So you really did adopt," she commented, looking at the twins. "Formed a family." There was something different in her tone, less hostile than the last time they had met. "Yes," Sarah responded simply, prepared to defend her family if necessary. Rebecca surprised her with a sad smile. "I'm happy for you." "Really?" Sarah studied the woman's face, looking for signs of sarcasm or manipulation, but found only tired sincerity. "Thank you," she responded genuinely. "I have a son now," Rebecca continued, indicating the child who was playing with the man accompanying her. "I got married 3 years ago. Finally, found peace." Sarah felt the tension she had, always carried in relation to Rebecca, beginning to dissolve. "I'm happy for you too." The moment was brief, interrupted by Olivia running to show something she had seen, but it was significant. When they said goodbye, something had changed. A circle was closing, an old wound beginning to heal. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Sarah and Michael talked about the encounter. She seemed different, Michael observed, more at peace with herself. "Sometimes people really do change," Sarah reflected. Maybe she found what she was really looking for. "I think we all did," Michael responded, embracing her, "just not in the way we imagined." Weeks turned into months, and months into seasons. The family established their own traditions: Sunday movie nights at home, complete with popcorn and voting to choose the film, birthdays celebrated with homemade cakes, often disastrously decorated, but always with much love, regular visits to New Orleans, where Amara received them with growing enthusiasm. Mrs. Josephine, initially suspicious of the rich Boston folks, as she called Sarah and Michael, gradually surrendered to the authentic affection they showed for her granddaughter and for the twins. Destiny, Amara's mother, established a relationship of mutual respect with Sarah, recognizing how the architect had become an important mentor for her daughter. The final adoption decree came almost a year after Jacob and Olivia had moved to the apartment. The hearing in court was brief but deeply significant. The children, dressed in their best clothes, remained surprisingly quiet during the procedure, as if they understood the solemnity of the moment. When the judge officially declared that Jacob and Olivia were now legally Sarah and Michael's children, with the right to all legal bonds and protections that filiation provides, Olivia broke, protocol jumping from her chair with a cry of joy. "Now we're officially a family forever," she asked, looking from Michael to the judge, who smiled at the child's spontaneity. "Yes, young lady," the magistrate responded with unusual gentleness. "Officially forever." Jacob, always more restrained, only squeezed Sarah's hand tightly, but his eyes shone with contained emotion. The celebration that followed was simple, yet significant. A lunch at home, with the presence of paternal and maternal grandparents, Melissa and her husband, some close friends, and of course Amara, who had traveled especially for the occasion, bringing with her a special gift, a large framed drawing representing all of them, including herself, as a united family. "To hang in the living room," she explained shyly, "for everyone to see that we're a family." Sarah hugged the girl, touched by the sensitivity and meaning of the gift. "It's perfect," she whispered, "exactly what we are." That night, after all the guests had departed and the children had finally fallen asleep, Sarah found Michael on the apartment's balcony contemplating the city lights. She joined him, resting her head on his shoulder, both absorbing the significance of the day. "If someone had told me that day at the altar that we would be here now, I would never have believed it," Sarah reflected. Michael kissed the top of her head. "Life has mysterious ways," he responded. "When you said you were infertile, I thought, our dream of a family was over. I never imagined that, in fact, it was just beginning in a different way." Sarah thought about everything they had lived through, the painful revelation, the separation, the reconciliation, the professional challenges, meeting Amara, the adoption process, the arrival of Jacob and Olivia. Each stage, even the most difficult ones, had been necessary to get them where they were. "You know what's funny?" she commented. "I always thought that not being able to have biological children was a flaw, something that made me less of a woman, less complete. Now I realize it was a gift, a redirection to the path we were really meant to follow." Michael nodded, understanding deeply. "Our children found their way to us exactly as they should have. They remained there, embracing, watching the starry sky over Boston. In a nearby room, Jacob and Olivia slept peacefully, finally secure, in the knowledge that they belonged, that they were loved unconditionally. In Mrs. Josephine's apartment in New Orleans, Amara fell asleep dreaming of her next visit to her adoptive siblings and of the bright future that Sarah was helping her visualize. A family had been formed, not by traditional paths, not as any of them had imagined, but exactly as it should be. A family built on conscious choices, on intentional love, on the courage to embrace the unexpected. And in the end, wasn't that what really mattered? Not shared blood, not reproductive capacity, but the daily decision to love, to remain, to build together something greater than the sum of their individual parts. Sarah smiled at the stars, feeling a deep peace that she had never experienced before. The road had been long and full of obstacles, but every step had been worth it. "I'm so grateful you didn't give up on us," she whispered to Michael, "for coming back to that bench in the park." "I could never really leave you," he responded. "You're my home, Sarah. You, Jacob, Olivia. You're my home." And so, under the starry sky of Boston, a silent promise was renewed. A promise of love that transcended biology, that overcame prejudices, that found creative ways to flourish even in the most unlikely soils. A promise made not only between husband and wife, but between parents and children, between mentors and protégés, between hearts that had found each other precisely when they needed it most. A promise of family, in its deepest and truest sense. The end. Dear listener, true love always finds its way, as Sarah and Michael discovered. And you? What would you do in their place? Leave your comment, subscribe to the channel for more moving stories like this one, and share with those who need to hear that family is much more than blood ties.